Once again, thank you everybody for being here tonight for another class of the Peaceful Solution Teacher Certification Training. We'll be in the, let's see if I can get this up here. We'll be in the acceptance unit. I wonder if this monitor could be turned on. I've got a little bit here I intend to show. Okay, a few technical difficulties. We're getting it worked out now, though. So we're in the acceptance unit, and I believe Catan left off on page 36 when he taught the last class, and he suggested that we read up and preview to be prepared for the class tonight. Did you do it? Did anybody do it? Man, look at all those hands out there. So, being prepared for tonight, and we're going to be discussing forgiveness, but first let's review just a little bit of what we've covered so far. So, William and Catan both have been going over intolerance. Well, this whole chapter, diversity, talking about intolerance, gets into racism a bit, and about being prepared, setting our mind in advance. And now we're going to be talking about forgiveness for those of us who have been, involved in intolerance in any way, whether a victim or perpetrator, whatever the case might be. So we want to learn, what forgiveness is. We want to learn what intolerance is, how to deal with it, and I think it might have been Chris that was talking about diversity. I could be mistaken, but I think that's where we started at. And just looking around right here tonight in the class, I can tell you this is one of the most diverse classes or groups that I've ever been around. I mean, I can see all nationalities. I can see men, children, adults. So it's a very, very diverse group. And I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity to practice tolerance and forgiveness in this great, diverse group each day that goes on. So let's go ahead and do just a little bit of review. We can turn to Lesson Plan 2, page E. Lesson Plan 2, page E, which is just before really kind of the beginning of the chapter. But Lesson Plan 2, page E, and Procedure 8. And this is where we'll kind of be starting, but it's all about forgiveness. It says, have students read the section in their handbooks entitled It's All About Forgiveness, found on page 37. And we're told to discuss the questions at the bottom of the page and allow students to write in their answers. And, of course, if you have a smaller classroom situation where intimate discussion can take place, well, that's great. We want to encourage students to always practice forgiveness of others who've not yet learned from this program. So if you feel like you've been a victim of intolerance in any way, we want to always learn how to practice this forgiveness we'll be talking about. And then remind the students that their example will be the best way to begin teaching acceptance to others. Now, one of the things about this chapter that I particularly like, well, not just this chapter, but this whole book, the acceptance book, it's always been a very moving book. Sometimes feelings, you don't forget about things really. Feelings from the past sometimes crop up a little bit, and I know that in listening to the previous teachers and talking about acceptance and accepting, those things about others that, the positive things about others, and of course we should have no problem accepting that a person might be from a different area of the state, the country, the world, different nationality, different color, different, possibly someone's in a wheelchair or some kind of handicap, something like that. We should always be accepting of these things. So when growing up, I know many of us have had situations take place where we might not have been really accepted, and it might not have been due to something that we did. I myself, I remember I was kind of tall and lanky and really kind of, I guess what they'd say, kind of dorky a little bit, When they said dribble the basketball, I slobbered on it, So not quite that, but it was something that really didn't interest me too much. But I found a group that did accept me, and many others have fallen into this too. People do want acceptance. They have a desire to be accepted and felt to be important and so forth. And so if one group doesn't give that to them, they're going to find someone who will. And many have fallen into, doing drugs or gangs or so forth, because they had that feeling of acceptance where possibly they never could get it from another group. And I know many of the personal stories here of the Peaceful Solution teachers in training here in this room, and so I know there's many that could associate with this. Let's go ahead and look at page 23 just to start out. This is the beginning of the chapter, Accepting Diversity. And at the beginning of the chapter, right there, it says, look around you. Notice that no two people are exactly alike. Even twins who might be physically identical can have character and personality traits that are completely opposite. And I believe William showed some pictures of different types of apples. Now, if you haven't had the opportunity to really run across that and try different types of apples, well, you're missing something, because most people know about the red delicious apple. You see them everywhere. They're used in candied apples, caramel apples, whatever, and it's quite the common thing. Now, there's nothing wrong with the red delicious apple. In fact, it has some great healing properties, especially for the throat and the lungs and so forth. So every apple has something different that it can do for you. And the flavors are different. Some very different, some close to the same. But if you're used to eating red delicious apples or Fuji apples, which are quite sweet, and you go and you grab hold of a green apple and bite into it, you've got a surprise waiting for you. It's quite a bit different, right? Though they're shaped the same and they're called an apple, there's big differences about them. So when we're looking at these physical differences, we have to remember there's also different cultures and values, and every person is unique. There is not another one of you out there anywhere. Anywhere. There out of the billions of people on this earth, there's not another exactly like you with the exact thoughts, the exact upbringing, and really not even looking exactly like you, though I've heard of there's some that look pretty close a lot of times. And so we have to remember that these differences here are not reasons that we should be intolerant towards anybody for any means. We need to learn to be accepting of all concerning the things we just talked about. Now, we talked about intolerance. If you turn to page 25, intolerance, which is the opposite of acceptance, takes on many different forms. And just to mention a few, the stereotyping, the prejudice, the discrimination, these are ways which intolerance shows up in our society. And when it's directed towards an individual or a community, it results in fear, distrust, anger, and, of course, even war. So we've got to start out when you think about it, it starts with us, and it starts out at a young age. It's what we learn when we're growing up. It's our environment. It's the influences that that are put before us, and so forth, which form us. And not to say that we can't change as we gain knowledge, the right knowledge, knowledge and great moral character. We can change. But if we've ever been a part of this, as you read through this chapter, some things will hit home. It'll touch base, and you'll know, if you've been involved in those things or not. As we continue on in page 26 and 27, there's a couple examples on page 26 about intolerance. One of them is Muslim children that are burned alive. I think one we heard about here years ago in Texas, the dragging the man down the road, and I mean, it was a very horrible, horrible crime. All these are. And then one talking about the Jews attacked in these incidents in Chicago. And all of these things are intolerance. It's stupidity. It's ignorance. So we have to realize, though, that these are people that have not been taught properly that are doing these things. And this is our job, to learn to go out and teach the proper way of conducting ourselves. On page 27, Sticks and Stones talks about being, called names, a little awkward-looking person, being talked about by those that didn't look might be quite so awkward. I remember a young man one time that was in junior high, I think, and he wore the standard dress that the junior high I went to for young men was Levi's and some kind of surfer T-shirt or something, But this person showed up in a pair of Coca-Cola pants that they got I guess he saved enough Coke tops or something, but Coca-Cola pants, red and white Coca-Cola all over, and I think they were pajamas rather than regular clothes, and of course he was laughed unmercifully. He was laughed to scorn, and that shows unacceptance right there too. But there was probably a group ready to accept him in probably not a positive way. So on page 28, intolerance leads to conflicts, and of course it shows a little bit about that up at the very top, and it gives us a couple examples. Remember the Holocaust of World War II, then the Civil Rights Movement, which we've heard a lot about. In fact, here recently, we've heard a lot about the Civil Rights Movement, and a renewing of some of that. In fact, right now, there's riots and demonstrations and so forth taking place. And then we have September 11th, 2001, which most would remember the World Trade Center and what took place there, and it being, as far as we know, blamed on the Muslim people in general, I think. And so a lot of people have a lot of hatred built up, whether they know that for a fact or not. They've got this intolerance and hatred built up. Now, on page 30, we learned that, we're not so different after all, especially when it comes to color and nationality, or color. How many races of people are there in the world? Well, there's one race. It's the human race. And then it shows what percentage of our genes accounts for physical differences. And it's really like 0.1%, which is such a minute, small portion. It accounts for our physical differences. So that means that we're all really alike. We all desire to be respected. We all desire to be accepted. We have, a lot of us, the same desires, the same wants, the same needs. And the more we can remember that about other people, and we take the focus off of ourselves so much and remember the other person also needs these things, then we can start working towards that true acceptance and helping others and loving our neighbor as ourselves, So on page 32, we have the example of the apples, which again William gave us the pictures of the apples, and then on page 33, we're talking a little bit more about being a leader, standing up for acceptance and standing up for others in the face of opposition, and being the example. And that's what we need to be. We need to be that person that stands up for those that possibly can't stand up for themselves. Moving on page 35, Catan went over this at the last class. He talked about the diplomats, these people who are trained in learning some of the culture and the needs and expectations of other nationalities and so forth when they come to the States or when someone from here goes to another country. There's diplomats that help out. And then he went into us choosing our words. I thought it was a pretty courageous thing. But as I learned later on in life, when you go and you go to another country and you meet the people, you know what? Everybody's alike. I mean, they really are. There's just differences in the way we speak and some of the customs or the culture a little bit, But, everybody needs food. Everybody needs to be, again, respected. Everybody needs acceptance. And amazingly, they all look for it in a lot of the same places. It's very interesting, you see a building that looks similar to a building that you remember here, and it kind of makes you a little more comfortable with things. Or you go into a store and you notice some of the same items that you would purchase here, which again makes you feel, a little more at home. And then you realize, oh, I drink coffee in the morning, but so do these people too. And so it's pretty interesting. It's actually quite eye-opening. So then here we are on page 36 and being prepared. And I want to encourage you to prepare your mind in advance. It says, deciding to stand up for acceptance and tolerance means preparing your mind in advance to deal with intolerance on a daily basis. Remember to be respectful even to those who are not tolerant. Now, that's not the easiest. It's not the easiest thing to do by any means. But we're asking you, as a teacher in training of the Peaceful Solution, to please remember to be tolerant and respectful of those who are not tolerant. They just have not been taught yet, or they haven't practiced enough of the Peaceful Solution yet. Okay, page 37. That's where we're at. So let's talk about this this forgiveness then for a minute. It's all about forgiveness. Another aspect, important aspect of dealing with intolerance, again, this is page 37 in our acceptance unit, of dealing with intolerance is to be willing to forgive others when they are intolerant towards you. Wow. Is that a major thing? It is. If you have experienced intolerance in any form, your first reaction might be to feel hurt or disappointed, or you might even have thoughts of revenge. And think about it. If there's someone that's showing intolerance towards you, and it's someone that might be in a position of some type of authority, a teacher, an employer, someone that you look up to. If intolerance is shown towards you because of something, and you feel this hurt and disappointment, hurt is a huge thing. When somebody feels like they've been hurt, whether they're correct or whether it's perceived hurt, it can still have the same impact with a person. It can be devastating. And in the Peaceful Solution, we learn how to deal with this And it doesn't feel great right away, but we learn how to deal with it so that we don't seek revenge and that we don't become that intolerant person. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But I'd like to share with you, I looked up since it's all about forgiveness, I looked up what forgiveness was, okay? Let's see if we can get this on the overhead. All right. So, forgiveness. Now, I kind of laughed a little bit in Katan's last class, because a couple of times when he looked up a definition, it was about the same thing. The action or process of forgiving. Okay. I thought it was a little bit funny there. I think it occurred to him twice in that last class, but you can see that, or being forgiven, and it gives a little example right there. So I went a little bit further. Of course, we have to find out now, what does forgive mean, right? So I looked up forgive, and what we have is to give up resentment against or stop wanting to punish someone for an offense or fault. So actually to pardon. To relent in being angry or in wishing to exact punishment for an offense or fault. And then to absolve from payment. That's goes a little bit deeper or a little bit in another course. But back up to the top. To give up resentment against or stop wanting to punish someone for an offense or a fault. A fault. That's important to remember, a fault. We all have faults, and many of us are working on our faults and trying to get past them using the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. All right, so continuing on. Deal with your feelings of hurt and disappointment appropriately by talking to a trusted adult or friend. You might be thinking when this hurt comes along, how could they do this? How could they possibly do this to me? And you start focusing on you. But again, by talking to a trusted adult or friend, and then guess what? You must then learn to forgive. To give up that resentment against and stop wanting to punish that person, okay? Now, to do that, you need to use the entire Peaceful Solution program. Because it's not an easy thing. You've got to have empathy. You've got to have compassion. You have to be practicing respect. You need to be thankful for your life. You need to be humble and caring. Now, if you have these things within you, then it'll be a lot easier to learn to forgive. But even then, it could be really tough. So forgiving others who have wronged you might not be the easiest thing to do, but without this very important character trait, your hurt and disappointment can turn into, look at that, anger, resentment, and hate. And guess what you become? You then become the intolerant one. Think about it. So, we're going to revert back to the character unit for a moment, which we will probably all throughout this course, because that was the foundation there, the starting point. Page 15 in the character unit, we have that positive character trait of forgiving. So, number 7, forgiving. I don't expect that everybody would have their character unit here tonight with them, but it'd be great to bring if you have one, because I think in every class we revert back to it a little. So, number 7, forgiving. To refrain from holding anger or resentment towards someone who has wronged you. For example, somebody laughed at you when you tripped, and rather than get upset or try to get even, you forgive and laugh with them, okay? Again, to do that, all of these things have to work synergistically, all of them together. Look around that number 7. Look at number 6. There's thankful. To be conscious of the benefits that you've received. To be thankful that you're even alive this day. Number 8. To be steadfast and persistent. Being determined not to give up or change what you've set out to accomplish. Number 9, self-control. Wow, what can we do without self-control? You've got to have self-control. And then on the other page, being educated, getting all the facts. Number 2, being respectful. Number 3, being patient. Demonstrating self-control, remaining calm. And when you look up the word patient, you find out that it also means to suffer. You're waiting in line and getting a little impatient. Well, if you can be patient, there's a little bit of suffering involved because you're still waiting in line, but you're learning patience. And when you start learning this patience, it's not a chore anymore. It's just another thing. Honest and trustworthy. And look at number 5, being humble, not being proud or arrogant in any manner. Let's look at page 60 of the character unit, because this is a very important thing when it comes to learning to forgive. Because, excuse me, thing's loud. Yeah, it's pretty hot and dry here in Texas this time of year. So, like Katan mentioned last time too, stay hydrated. You've got to. Look at page number 60. Influences are all around us. And in case you don't have it, it's though on the overhead. Page 60. Influences are all around us. This is my new book. Your values play such a key role in developing your character that you must be aware of how influences affect the things that are important to you. Just remember that word influence. An influence is something or someone that has the ability to affect your attitude, way of thinking, feeling, behaving. What we're talking about in being able to forgive. Remember page 37, it's all about forgiveness. And what we're talking about in being able to forgive is having that attitude of forgiveness. You say, what's the attitude of forgiveness? Well, this is what we're talking about. It's all these things together. Because if you're not thankful, you're not going to have an attitude of forgiveness. If you're not respectful, why would you have an attitude of forgiveness? If you don't have any self-control, you couldn't possibly have an attitude of forgiveness. So all these things have to work together. And then we have to guard these things that we're learning and not let outside influences blow us up. And because I don't know, I'm sitting here trying to think back on, I don't know what the last movie I saw or something, but I'm trying to think back on some of these things, and I don't know if there was much forgiveness ever shown on any of those, or I don't see any forgiveness taking place on the news, on some internet sites. No one's talking about forgiveness. Who's talking about forgiveness out there? I'll tell you what they're talking about. What they're talking about is this. On the overhead? So what they're talking about is this. Never forget, never forgive. And they don't even know who they're not forgiving. They just have something in their mind that they've put there. That's what's there. That's what the media teaches us. That's what these influences, not just the media, but other people around us, if they're not familiar with the peaceful solution and they don't have some of these traits that they're working on, they're not practicing forgiveness either. Here's another one right here. Never forget, never forgive. I mean, you could go on and on. This is so prevalent in society today. And this isn't from 20 years ago. This is from today. Never forget. Now, these are 911 quotes, but it just shows you. I think some of these people are really planning on never forgetting and never forgiving. Because it's 20 years later and they're still doing this thing today. Think about it. So these influences are so extremely important. Let's see. Look at the bottom paragraph there. It says, this is on page 60 of the character unit, influences can come in all different sizes. They can be positive or negative, subtle or bold. Those are pretty bold right there. But the one thing they all have in common is they have the ability to affect what you value and affect your character in either a positive or negative way. It can affect your attitude. It can affect your attitude of forgiveness. There might be someone in this room right now today thinking, why should we forget that? Why should we forget what those people did? Why should we forgive them? Well, on the next page, it talks about our knowledge about influences. And it has a list and says, what are the following are influences? And it mentions jobs, community, advertisements, designers, books, songs, commercials, school, teachers, movies, smells, magazines, the internet, religious leaders, politicians, billboards, family. I mean, it's massive. It's there. And like I said, even there could be even some around that don't quite understand yet about that and why people need to be forgiven, because they haven't been taught the proper way. So, looking at the influences just a little bit more, the picture on page 62 shows how subtle these influences can be. So subtle that even the smell of a certain cookies baking or bread or something like that can take you back many years to when your grandma used to cook these cookies, Or it could smell of a certain candy can take you back to childhood years, or so these influences can also bring other thoughts into your mind that you might rather forget. So what I'm saying is basically what Catan alluded to last class. I'm going to show you this. I took a copy. For those of you that don't have the book with you, I've got a copy here that we can look at, but page 79 of the character unit, it says, now that I have it, how do I keep it? And I believe this was the picture he was alluding to about the young man behind the wall. He had a brick wall he was hiding behind from all these influences being thrown at him, shot at him, hammered at him, all these influences coming from everywhere. He's like, no, get back, And if you look, I don't know if we can probably zoom in a little bit here and see what his wall is made of. See what his wall is made of? Respect, honesty, trustworthy, patient, courage, generous, humility, compassion. And look at that one right there in the middle, forgiving. So he's got a wall built up of these great moral character traits, this attitude of positive moral character and being able to forgive. But with those influences coming at him, like that rocket that said influences right there, anyway, with that coming at him, being hammered at him all the time, it can wear you down a little bit. So you got to keep that wall built up strong, okay? Does everybody kind of understand that? Shake your head, yes, no, okay. All right, so I do want to read this, though, this particular page. It says, in the previous chapter, you learned that obtaining a positive character involves what you value, who you imitate, and your willingness to practice positive behavior. Now that you know the basic steps to obtaining a positive character, the question is, how do you maintain it? Well, to maintain that character, you must constantly make choices that are respectful and compassionate towards yourself and others. Compassionate, remember that word. Maintaining your positive character means protecting and guarding yourself from influences. Now, I'm focusing a lot on influences tonight, and it's because it's all about forgiveness. If you've had any kind of intolerance perpetrated against you in your life, you've got to learn to forgive. But you're not going to do it without having these other character traits within you to be able to do that. And if you have the wrong influences entering your life, it's not going to hold. You're not going to be able to do it. It takes work. So you got to protect and guard yourself from these influences and choices that could lead to developing negative character traits. Maintaining your character must be done on a daily basis. Sometimes it has to be done minute by minute. And in this chapter, You will learn that maintaining your character requires controlling your thoughts as well as being prepared. Remember, like on page 36, be prepared. Set your mind in advance. Be prepared to deal with any situation that could compromise your character. And with so many negative influences coming at you from all different directions, it takes effort, commitment, and determination to maintain your most valuable possession, and that's your positive character. Okay, are we ready to get back to the acceptance unit on page 37? So, continuing on page 37, your hurt and disappointment, that's midways, kind of almost midways down the page, can turn into anger, resentment, and hate, you becoming the intolerant and becoming the perpetrator of it instead of the victim. When you hold on to these negative emotions, you can develop that intolerant attitude. See, I'd like you to write this down if you would. Forgiving takes empathy, compassion, respect, thankfulness, humbleness, and caring. It takes all of those things to be forgiving. If you get that intolerant attitude, like it's talking about in the beginning of the second paragraph, you become unthankful, disrespectful, proud, self-centered, hateful, uncompassionate, and uncaring. See the two different ends of the spectrum here that we're looking at? You can actually become like the person that hurt you and begin hurting others. So, the peaceful solution means making a genuine effort to interact with all people in a moral way, even the ones who have been intolerant towards you. By maintaining the positive character traits of forgiveness and respect, you can serve as a moral influence to others. And always remember, like we learned at the very beginning of learning about the peaceful solution, when we heard what the author of the peaceful solution, Israel Hawkins, what he told us about what he learned at a young age and what his dad told him. He always remembered that two wrongs never make a right. Retaliation never has solved a problem. It only creates more. No matter, if it makes you feel great to retaliate against someone, that means you're not practicing having a forgiving attitude. You're practicing having an intolerant attitude. Now, I'd like to show you something. On the overhead, let me zoom out a moment. Okay, so take a look at that. I'd like you to think for a moment about somebody that might have done something that was hurtful to you, or you feel like they did something that was hurtful to you. Remember, sometimes we imagine things being done. It isn't always true. Sometimes our imagination gets carried away, and we think that someone has been disrespectful towards us. So I'd like you to think about it for just a minute, and think about how you think about yourself when dealing with that person. Does everybody got that kind of in their mind? They think of someone along the way, maybe from the past. I'm not trying to. I hesitated a little bit to do this, but I wanted to make sure you got the picture. So here you are, and here's the person that did something that was hurtful to you. Here's you. How do you consider yourself? What's your attitude about yourself? Do you consider yourself the victim? Do you consider yourself being a hard worker, being thankful, being a fair person, being compassionate? This is you. You're looking at yourself. Respectful, being caring and ever so humble, and being tolerant. So you're picturing yourself in that manner, possibly, while picturing the other person as the perpetrator, the other person being unthankful. You know this guy. He's arrogant and proud and disrespectful. He doesn't care about nobody. He's unfair, he's intolerant, and impatient. And you're not going to let him do you that way no more. Okay? Well, notice the word attitude there in the middle. Now, if this is how, I'd like you to leave that up for a moment if you would. If this is how you see the other person, are you going to have a forgiving attitude towards that person? Yes? No? If you see yourself on the column on the left and you see the other person as the column on the right, this being the right-hand column, then how could you ever forgive that person? Are you really going to forgive that person? I think until we can understand that that other person has the same needs, the same desires, and the same need for acceptance and respect as we do, to where we can even look at that other person and say, you know, that guy's a hard worker, man. And I know he's got to be thankful for many things in his life. And, you know, I've seen him really be fair in a lot of situations. And I've noticed, I'll tell you, I've seen compassion coming from that person before. And I know he's respectful sometimes. It might not have been that time with me, but I think he really is caring and humble. And, you know, if I could get to know that person a little bit better, I might find out that he is actually tolerant instead of intolerant. And we might be holding on to something that occurred years ago when someone might have been practicing a little more intolerance. You know what I mean? I know for myself, I feel like I've come, you know, a little ways anyway in the past couple of years. I know each one of us out there have to have come a little farther along the way being part of this teacher training course and being part of all the other classes we have available to us. We've had to improve. Don't you think the other person might have also? Why don't we look at the other person in this column right here for a while, okay? So that when we approach that person again, we can approach them as an equal, as somebody needing the same thing that we need. Us being tolerant of them and their need or not even knowing if they've overcome that or anything yet, you know, without talking to them, because we've had this block in our head, you know, about them. I guess that would be a blockhead. So if you think of the other person as you think of yourself and look for their great qualities, you know, I'll tell you, I have had the opportunity to work with just about everybody in this room. Just about everyone. Not everyone, but just about. And I can tell you that no matter what the perceived faults might be or the quirks that a person might have. Remember, we're all a little different, right? And we all have different personalities, and we all were raised different, and you know, different things occurred in our lives. But in all of that, I guarantee you, if you start looking for the great things that a person does, then we're on our road to acceptance, to accepting to accepting those things, to where we can look at the other person and actually think of them as we would think of ourselves, and have the same respect and care and concern for them as we want them to have for us too. Okay, so moving on there. On page 37, remember that. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Retaliation never solved any problem. And so then we have a bit of an activity there at the bottom. It says, answer the questions on the lines below. Most people have experienced intolerance in one form or another. I think we all have. If you've experienced intolerance or know someone else who has, do you recall how the situation was handled? Oh boy, do I. I can recall how a couple of them were handled, and I didn't do so well. You know, hopefully y'all did better than I did, okay? But think about it. I know we've all handled it wrong in the past, but I bet we have some successes too to where we handled it right. Let's focus on that. Let's look back on what we did and how we handled it right so we can move on and try to start doing the same thing again. So that's an activity that you can do for yourself there. I want to remind you again, having that attitude of forgiveness, having empathy, compassion, respect, thankfulness, humbleness, caring, practicing self-control, having all those things so we can learn to forgive. We've got to learn to forgive. It goes back to in one of the Peaceful Solution books that talks about holding a grudge, and it has the picture of the person drinking the glass of poison and waiting for the other person to die. How silly that is, isn't it? All right, well, page 38. Let's go there. Page 38. There's nothing wrong with you being you and me being me as long as we continue to build a positive moral character and develop traits such as honesty, consideration, steadfastness, and empathy. We can accept and help each other regardless of our physical differences, and we can be friends. We haven't spoken a lot about empathy. Some, but empathy, being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes for a minute, not so you can go out and do something wrong, or you can make fun of them in any manner, and I don't know if I'd actually slip into their shoes, but to put yourself into their shoes, meaning you're willing to look at what they've been through in their life. I don't know what everybody in here has been through. I don't know everybody's story, but empathy is understanding that just because you were raised a certain way and you have a certain level of knowledge and you have a certain level of education, it doesn't mean that everybody does. And in order to connect with somebody else, we might have to lower ourselves from our high and mighty, lofty goal or attitude that we have of ourselves and show forth that humility and the empathy to understand where that person's coming from. I couldn't possibly know what everybody's been through, and so other than having some examples to share with you along the way, so you can see some of the things, some of the similar things, these similitudes, where you could apply it in your life, and I'm sure that in all the teachers here in the Peaceful Solution, there's somebody that has gone through similar things that you've gone through, and can probably connect. But being empathetic and willing to see where another person has come from, and knowing how to connect with them and help them to learn positive moral character. We've got a few minutes left. We can get started on page 39. Well, let's take a look back here real quick on lesson plan 2, page E, before we do that. So, the activity, of course, discuss the questions at the bottom of the page and write in the answers. That'll be something you can do on your own. But encouraging students to always practice forgiveness of others who haven't learned this program. That's what we're talking about. Having the attitude of forgiveness so that you can be the example, so you can be empathetic and look at that and say, I don't know where that guy's been. I don't know what he's been through. He's probably been through a lot more than I have. Maybe I could help him rather than hold him in some kind of hold some kind of grudge. So, and remind that your example is going to be the best way to begin teaching acceptance to others. Your example, that means that when we leave here tonight, that your example, what you do, what other people see you and me do, that's what's going to be the deciding factor. That's what people are going to look at and say, hey, man, that guy really does show some empathy. Or, man, I didn't realize that guy was that patient. Look at him waiting in line there, even though he was first in line or something. Something occurred. We can look for those great qualities. We can start tonight. Really. Think about it. Instead of looking for the negative things so that we can go and tell others and say, did you see what so-and-so did, man? We can look at the positive things and we could go say, man, did you see what so-and-so did? Whoa. He waited for an hour to get, his widget or something, or his meal, or who knows, I mean, that'll be a great thing when we all can do that. Believe me, I want to be able to do it too. So we want to conclude the lesson by turning to page 39 and reading this section, What I've Learned. We won't get very far probably tonight, but remind students to practice acceptance with all people, not just those that your next door neighbor, or just the guys that you work with at work or something, I mean, really those we do need to practice acceptance with, don't get me wrong, but we also need to do it with all people. Resist the tendencies to categorize people. This is what I was talking about. Let's resist the negatives. Resist the tendencies to categorize people and make generalizations about others. And what really matters about anyone, regardless of their physical characteristics, is who they are on the inside and what kind of character they have. And you're never going to know it unless you're looking for the great things. But everyone will know what your character is if you're the one going and saying, did you see what so-and-so did? They're going to know right away what your character is. They won't have to look very far. It shows. Remember, we're the example, whether of negative or positive. What we say and do, what other people see us say and do, is what's going to be the deciding factor in their mind. Again, we all need to be empathetic and understanding and know where a person's coming from. And also remember that even the person that might be coming and talking negative about somebody else, you have to then be empathetic towards them and tolerant towards them and understanding towards them in that, where have they been? What are they going through? Are they having a bad day? Man, it's an exciting thing to live through, isn't it? There's so many aspects of this that we have to learn. It's not just one thing. It's not just reading a page and being done with it. There's so much. It's something that we can carry on for an extremely long time and probably still not learn all of it, But we can start here and we can start tonight. Let's read the first thing there on page 39. We are all unique human beings with the same desire to be needed, appreciated, and respected. I've heard that somewhere else. When someone abuses that trust and honor, it's hard for us to get past if we don't feel appreciated and respected anymore or needed. It's hard to get past, but we can do it. And I want to look at the bottom one too, because we're just about out of time. Even when others show intolerance towards me, I'm determined to be respectful and maintain a forgiving attitude. I have an arrow pointing back up to number 1. We're all unique human beings with the same desire to be needed, appreciated, and respected. It's like a big circle. Even when others show intolerance towards me, I'm determined to be respectful and maintain a forgiving attitude. Boom, circle up. We are all unique human beings with the same desire to be needed, appreciated, and respected. Boom, circle down. It all works together, guys. I'm going to leave the middle of that, the rest of it. Well, by the way, page 32, let me just, page 32 goes over that. An apple a day keeps the intolerance away, and what really matters, and so forth. And actually, I believe page 33 went into that a little bit too. Always remember, be unselfish, empathetic, compassionate, respectful, and look at the thing at the bottom of the page there, the little saying. One of the most important ways to reduce intolerance is to regard others with the same care and compassion as you regard yourself. And remember the little thing, let me put it up there one time for you. Overhead, please. Remember that thing right there. When you're dealing with people, look at them like this left-hand column before you put them in this one, okay? Look at them in this left-hand column and consider that, you know what? They've been a victim to intolerance. Everybody in here has before in their life. Everyone has been a victim before. Look at them as, hey, man, they're a hard worker. Now, I've worked with a lot of you guys. I know you're hard workers. They're thankful to be alive, thankful to have look at us. Look at us in this nation that we're in right here today. We have food. We have shelter. There's not one person in here tonight that does not have food, shelter, and clothing. If there is, raise your hand and witness that to me right now. I don't think there is, guys. Be thankful for that. We can be fair. We can be compassionate. That person we're fixing to talk to or that we've had a little conflict with, they can be respectful. They weren't always disrespectful. They might have been to me one time, but hey, they might have had a bad day. They're caring. They're humble. They're tolerant. Man, look at that person. I want to go talk to them. They're just like me. Now, if you start looking at it like that to your neighbor, to your coworker, to that person that has wronged you at some point in time in the past that you got a little grudge built up against that you've been holding on to, if you look at that left-hand column and keep that in mind when you greet them, guess what? Your life will improve far beyond you could even imagine. I'm working on it myself, and I hope you guys remind me along the way. And I can encourage each and every one of you, if you see me doing something stupid and having an intolerant attitude towards somebody, I don't mind one bit if you say, hey, David, can I talk to you a minute? I'd look forward to it, okay? Thank you for being here tonight. We look forward to the next class. Next class will be on Sunday. I don't know what the date is on it, excuse me. But it'll be at 5:30 till 6:30. We look forward to you being here, whether you're in person or whether you're on the internet. The 8th. So 8/8/21, I believe, will be the date, okay? So we look forward to seeing you all again. Hope some of this sticks with you. I hope it sticks with me. Thank you.